Zig. Yesterday, Ziggy made his way over to the main barn. He very quickly became friends with Studman, and he seems to be settling in quite well.
Okay, Ziggo. Where you going?
He has definitely settled back down to his normal self, and today I'm going to go ahead and give him a hoof trim. I have had Ziggy for 2 months, and I have done 2 little touch-ups on his feet since then. Ziggy does have nice strong feet, but they were a bit on the flared side when I first got him. The first 2 trims have just been me trying to gather up his foot. The basic vitamin and mineral supplement he's been getting does help their feet grow quite a bit. I didn't realize it until I was going back through the footage, but this is actually the very first time I've tied Ziggy up outside of the trailer. There is quite a bit of length to come off of his hoof today, and hopefully by the time I'm done, his feet will have no more flares on them. He is a tiny bit hesitant to go ahead and pick up his feet for me, but as we move along, he becomes a lot more relaxed and starts investigating what exactly I'm doing. Ziggy did come from a guest ranch, and sometimes these horses have their feet done on a table, which can be a little bit surprising to people. It is kind of like a squeeze chute that goes on its side and lifts the horses off the ground, and they get their feet trimmed like that. For outfits that have a lot of draft horses and half drafts, it's probably more preferable than doing it the traditional way. The foot on the right I just did, and then you can see on the left one that it does flare out at the bottom still. Now that I've got it under control, I shouldn't have any more problems with flaring as long as I keep him on a regular schedule. I'll go ahead and trim the next one, and this is how much I actually took off. There was also a lot of sole that needed to be exfoliated from his foot. Since I'm not really in a hurry, I gave him a lot of time to relax and just take in what we were doing. Even though Ziggy is 18 years old, every time I get a new horse, I just like to take it slow and steady until I figure out what exactly they're going to be like to have their feet trimmed. I had been worried that he might have a little bit of laminitis, and horses with that sometimes do not like the rasp being used on their feet. Ziggy didn't seem to mind, so I think I'm going to go ahead and start him out on grass in the next couple of days. I will, of course, keep a very close eye on him, but his feet have shaped up nicely, and I want to get him out on the grass so he can get a little bit of extra nutrition that way. The hooves are looking pretty good from the outside, but I did want to show you guys some remnants of white line disease that Ziggy has. This is a bacterial or fungal infection that gets down in the white line of their hoof. Because he did have some serious flaring, his hoof wall was a little bit separated, and that let all of the bacteria and fungus get right up in there. I have been treating it, but his foot is going to have to grow all of the flare out first before it's completely gone. There are a lot of different things you can use to treat it, but I just like to put Hoof Doctor on it every time I handle their feet, and it seems to get rid of most of the funk that they have going on. To help his feet from flaring any further, I am going to roll the edges. I can feel that there is still a little bit of flare to his hoof. I'm just going to take off all of the mud that he has caked on there. I wasn't planning on putting any shoes on Ziggy, but I'll have to see if he gets sore. I did take him quite short today just to try and get rid of all of the flare that I could. My arena does have particularly hard footing, so he might have to have a pair of shoes. I am going to start taking him out on some trails, so it might be beneficial to him if we're going to hit some rockier terrain if he does have the extra protection.
Thanks, Zig.
Since coming over to the main barn, I can definitely tell a big difference in Ziggy's general demeanor. He just seems a lot more relaxed. His hind feet are starting to get a little bit of chipping in them. I haven't really done too much with these.
Ziggo, you gonna be a bad boy?
He has been a little bit snatchy about his hind feet, and I think it's just because he's a tiny bit sore in his stifles. Being a little bit on the shorter side, sometimes when a farrier goes to do little short horses, they just lift their leg up too high and it's really uncomfortable for them. I lowered my stand about 2 inches and it was the perfect height for Ziggy. This is the amount that I took off his hind foot. Not very much, but he was wearing a little bit on the crooked side. He had a little bit more flare going on the outside of his foot as compared to the inside. Really, it doesn't look too much different than the one I haven't trimmed yet. The quarantine area does have really soft footing, so he hasn't been wearing his feet too much, but it seems like his hind feet haven't grown. He also has a bit of white line on his hind feet as well that I'm treating. Right at the toe you can see that it's looking pretty normal, but around the edges he does still need it to grow out quite a bit. He has had some funk on his hind legs that I have just been washing, but I think today I'm going to give it a serious antimicrobial treatment. I'm going to give him a bath with this Orvis soap, which is my favorite thing to wash the horses with. It doesn't have any medications or anything in with it. It is just straight up soap and it gets them really, really clean. I think it's a little bit frowned upon to do it this way, but I just slather the soap right on them, and then as they're getting sprayed, it kind of bubbles up and coats their whole body. This stuff gets really sudsy, so a little bit really does go a long way. I've noticed Ziggy hasn't been particularly good about having things sprayed on him, so this might take a little bit of extra time today. The couple of times I've washed his back legs, I've just done it with a bucket, so I didn't have to spray him at all. I have worked for a few guest ranches and a lot of them will not hose the horses off at the end of the day. It really depends on where they're taking the rides and if they have access to water. But it's really not surprising that Ziggy isn't super calm for this, but I'm just going to take it slow and give him a good idea of what he's supposed to be doing. Even if he wiggles around quite a bit, I am not going to get upset. I'm just going to go ahead and wait until he's standing still and then take the water away. In no time at all, he figured out that he was just supposed to stand still and let me hose him off. For his hind feet, he was a little bit extra wiggly, which is not uncommon. I did want to make sure I got them nice and wet so I could give them a good scrub down. With this soap, I just kind of suds them up with my hands and then I'll hose them off after I'm done scrubbing. For his hind legs, I did put a little bit of medicated shampoo on and let it sit for a while. They make a bar shampoo that is basically sulfur based and it works really well for itches and bacterial infections, so that is what I used on Ziggy. The second time I went to go hose him off, I adjusted the nozzle a little bit and he ended up standing a lot better. I wanted to make sure I got all of the suds off of his back legs and get them really clean, and he was a little bit wiggly still for that. Hopefully after this treatment his legs will be back to normal. He was a little bit squirmy for me to trim him and he might just be really itchy. After a while, I think he really enjoyed the cool water on his legs. Now that he's had plenty of downtime, I am going to start back in on some more training with him. Before he moves on to his new home, I do need to take him out and ride him on a few trail rides and really get to see what exactly he's like in different environments. I want to make sure I have as much information as possible so his new home can be a perfect match. Since I don't want him to roll right away and get disgusting again, I am going to leave him tied while he dries. Since he hasn't really stood tied for me that much yet, I am going to clean out his pen and keep a super close eye on him. It seems like he'll have no trouble standing tied for long periods of time. Coming from a guest ranch, this is something that he probably did every single day while he was waiting for guests to come. Judging by the handful of times that I have already ridden him, I do think he is going to make a much better trail horse than an arena horse. His ability to stand tied and not wiggle around is definitely going to be important. It is crazy how fast the weeds have been popping up in this arena. I haven't drug it since he's been here, and just over the last couple of days there have been a ton of weeds that have popped up. Even when I'm poking around his legs with the pitchfork, Ziggy seems to be able to stand still quite well. It only takes me about 15 minutes to clean his pen and get a few odds and ends done, and then I'm ready to turn him back out again. It looks like he is almost completely dry. I'm just gonna release him and hopefully he won't roll right away. Ziggy seems like the kind of horse that really just wants his own person to hang out with on a regular basis. I have a feeling he was a little bit upset that I didn't actually ride him today. I do think that Ziggy would make the perfect match for a child or a younger teen that wants to ride a lot in the mountains. Since Ziggy is an Arabian, he should be able to continue working for quite a long while. I have not yet seen any lameness issues with him, so there's no reason why he can't go right back into work. His top line is continuing to improve every day, so I think with the addition of a few trail rides a week, he'll really look better in another month or two. Studman has really been enjoying having Ziggy next to him and not pestering him. I actually think Studman is the one that's been doing the pestering. I don't know how this railing got in his pen, but I'm just going to put it over here in this little pile. I have noticed that if Ziggy eats his dinner too close to Studman, Studman doesn't quite like it. We are finally over our crazy spring weather and we are definitely heading right into summer. It has been significantly warmer and there hasn't been any crazy snowstorms or rainstorms in quite a while. After I clean up from Ziggy, I give Nigel his second dinner. It has been really nice to get back into kind of a normal routine with everybody. Ziggy was a little bit surprised by how small Nigel was, but he just looked at him for a minute or two and now he's totally fine with him. Since it's been cooler in the evenings, I've been letting everybody stay outside. Ziggy will get his own stall very shortly and hopefully him and Studman will continue to get along. We are finally coming into the time of year where I get to ride the most. In the next couple of days, I will be turning the boys out onto their big pasture for the summer. Whiplash and Goose will continue to go out on their little pasture. I have a very specific schedule that I like to keep for the horses this time of year, and it makes for a lot more time for me to actually ride them. Because a lot of these horses do have training issues, I can't just pop out and ride them one day and then let them sit for a week. Out of all the horses I have, Gus and Frisco Bill are really the only two horses that I can do that with. Stewie has not been started under saddle. I'm really looking forward to finally riding him. He has been getting a little bit bored Once I put a handful of rides on him, he should be ready to go on some pretty serious adventures this summer. Little Gus does take quite a bit of prep work for me to get ready because he can get anxious about being ridden. If he gets too worried about it, he will stress himself out and give himself ulcers. Pete also takes a lot of warming up time in the spring, so he needs about a week or two of consistent work before his mind is finally ready to learn new things. Somebody recently asked why I just don't buy normal horses to enjoy. For me, who enjoys the process of getting them trained and troubleshooting issues, I find normal horses kind of boring, to be honest. It is nice to just have a few that I can hop on whenever I want, but the process of training these harder horses really interests me more. A horse like Goose or Pete is definitely a much more satisfying endeavor for me. As I was winding down, I managed to find a new gopher hole that has sprung up. I have been filling them in, so there are a few new holes popping up here and there outside of the horse's normal pasture. I've been going back and forth a little bit on what I'm going to do with Whiplash this summer. He is 20 years old and I've only ridden him I think 2 or 3 times. He was never started as a young horse, he just has been a pasture pet his whole life. Frisco is 29 years old and I just stopped riding him last year, so potentially Whiplash could have 8 years of good riding left in him. As he starts to get older, it would probably actually be in his benefit if I were to get him out and take him on some rides every now and then. Goose is in the same boat as Pete. He really needs a couple of weeks of consistent work until he's ready to learn anything new. Typically, my schedule is turning the horses out in the morning. The ones that are in the barn, they will get worked before lunchtime, and then after lunch I'll come back and bring everybody in out on the pasture. I'll go very quickly from riding 0 horses a day to riding 7 or 8. I have taken a peek at the weather for the next week and it is going to be crazy hot, so hopefully it won't get too hot for me to ride. I'm not really worried about the horses, I'm more worried about myself getting heat exhausted. When I'm at the barn all day working horses without an indoor arena or any kind of shade, I tend to get exhausted pretty quickly. If it ends up getting way too hot, I might end up hauling the horses out to an indoor arena just so we can ride in the shade for the hottest time of the year. Typically, I don't get the horses out on pasture until around the 1st of July, so I am actually ahead of schedule a little bit at this point. I had thought about turning Ziggy out with the boys, but he's gonna go in his own private pasture while I get him introduced to the grass. The longer he has his own space over here, the more it seems like he just enjoys being around the other horses but having his own private area. I was a little bit hesitant to move him into a stall right away because he's been used to getting turned out. So over the next couple of days, he will join Studman in the barn with his own run. Studman is also not started under saddle. He's probably the least broke of the horses I'm going to start this year. I did saddle him once when I very first got him, and it is pretty obvious that he had never had anything done with him besides maybe some really bad groundwork. So I'll be excited to see how he improves when I finally get going on him. Thank you guys so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.